It means the Ministry's interfering at Hogwarts.
You're not going mad. You're just as sane as I am.
I must not tell lies.
You seem to be laboring under the delusion that I'm going to, what was the phrase? Come quietly.
Hey everyone, welcome to Hogwarts, a podcast. Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of Hogwarts, a podcast. We are covering Chapter 22, the world's longest chapter title. Also known as St. Mungos Hospital for Magical Maladies and Injuries. Elizabeth is with us.
Hello, everyone.
That is such a long chapter. Well, we'll get to the hospital specifically a little later, but my goodness, I work in a healthcare field. I would loathe working in this kind of setting because it's bonkers.
It seems like total chaos.
And I get emergency rooms in general are very much chaos. Mm-hmm. But I feel like magical issues are a whole other world of chaos.
Yeah.
All right, so we're going to kind of go through this in three sections. We're going to talk about where this starts off immediately from where the last chapter left off.
Right.
We get into Dumbledore's office. Then we have a scene at Grimmauld Place, and then we get the actual hospital. So with Dumbledore's office, I really like how we get into the nuts and bolts of his office a little bit.
Mm-hmm. I mean, any visit to Dumbledore's office is always interesting.
Yeah, but here we get a little bit more at play. You get a lot more at play. He just walking up on the Griffin door of it all. You hear what Harry thinks is maybe a dozen or so voices. And then as, Minerva knocks on the door, they all immediately silence.
Right.
And then you walk in and it's just Dumbledore in his nightgown, night robe stuff.
Seemingly by himself.
All the portraits are asleep.
Right.
And it's like, this is kind of with even Fawkes is asleep behind him.
Right.
And
we find out what the voices are.
Obviously, Dumbledore was brainstorming, maybe the best way to put it.
With all the portraits. Which the portraits are of past headmasters and headmistresses. Which just makes me think that, being a Hogwarts headmaster or headmistress is, it's quite the gig. Because even after you're dead, your portrait still is able to have some sort of influence over Hogwarts. And at least, in the headmaster, the current headmaster or headmistress, your opinion or your insight can still have some influence. And you get to listen in on what's going on in the school. You have a pretty important role still.
It seems as though just to be the headmaster or headmistress of Hogwarts, you need to be a fairly prominent witch or wizard. Mm-hmm. And in doing so, you end up having your portrait in other places.
Right.
And obviously there's still scales to that. Some are more important than others.
Right.
But still, it's a pretty neat thing. And you essentially see the portraits are his communication network. Mm-hmm. And they are essentially honor-bound to the current headmaster. And if you remember, we discussed how portrait magic works.
Right. A long time ago. And part of that portrait magic is that the portrait of that witch or wizard has all of the knowledge and wisdom and personality that person had. Right. Wasn't it, correct me if I'm wrong, but wasn't it you get it painted prior to your death, then you're able to
teach it,
who you are?
Yep.
And then that's more accurate to yourself?
Yep.
Okay.
So, presumably, with all these great witches and wizards, Dumbledore has quite the wealth of opinions.
Well, that's what I'm saying. If you were a headmaster or headmistress of Hogwarts, dang, your influence, even after you die, you still get to have some insight into what's going on in the world. You still get to give your 2 cents on stuff. if you have a headmaster who, maybe needs a little bit of a, I don't know, help me be more confident in what decision to make, like your 2 cents could be really valuable. It'd be a cool role to have.
It's also interesting, probably for the portraits, if that's a thing. Can portraits be interested? I don't know. But it's probably interesting for the portraits to see new headmasters and headmistresses come in and see how they handle the school.
Yeah. Yeah.
And see, like, oh, he's doing a good job, or
yeah,
oh, this guy's weird.
Well, I was also thinking about, like, he was talking about some of the portraits, like you said, how they have multiple portraits so they can go in and out of their other portraits. Like, where in the world would you rather be than just in Dumbledore's office?
Well, how does that magic work exactly? Because if you're honor bound to the headmaster
mm-hmm.
of Hogwarts,
mm-hmm.
even though you have a portrait somewhere else,
mm-hmm.
is there, like, once you leave the Hogwarts headmaster's office, you are, like, magically muted as far as what happens in that office stays in that office, kind of thing? You know what I mean?
Yeah. I was more thinking of the fact that it's like, let's say you have 6 portraits of yourself. You're a very important person.
Mm-hmm.
It seems like there's only one, like, painted you, and you can only be in one portrait at a time. So It's like you have 5 empty portraits elsewhere. I'm thinking, like, if I had that many portraits and I had one in the headmaster's office, I'm never visiting my other portraits unless I have to. Like, where would be more exciting than Dumbledore's office?
Okay. You're talking about, essentially, a principal's office.
Which is a very interesting place to be.
Who never really sees kids. It's not like a normal principal's office that sees kids all the time.
Okay, but it's
Unless
Dumbledore.
Your name is Harry Potter, you're not seeing a whole lot of kids.
Yeah, but it's Dumbledore, and he sees lots of important people, and he has all these strange instruments in his office.
Not all the time, though. Not like 24/7.
No, but I feel like it's a pretty interesting place to be.
Versus like the Ministry of Magic, or...
Okay, maybe like going to St. Mungos and
or St.
seeing
Mungos.
Like people with teapots for heads or something walk by. Like, yeah, that'd be fun. But I feel like Dumbledore's office would be the place to be.
Well, okay. So let's say you're one of these portraits, and you were the headmaster of Hogwarts in like the 1500s.
Uh-huh.
Not every headmaster was Albus Dumbledore.
Right.
So I'm assuming it wasn't all as cracked
then
up. You're there the entire time. Anyway.
I will say, if it's Dumbledore's in charge, I want to be in the headmaster's office.
Fair enough.
If it's somebody else, maybe I'd go visit my other portraits.
Anyway. So before we get more into portraits, Albus tries to figure out what is going on.
Mm-hmm.
And without looking at Harry...
Ever.
Which starts to irritate Harry quite a bit.
Mm-hmm.
He hears the story and then has a question for him. What point of view did you have in this?
Yeah, so like, how did you see this? And Harry's like, in my dream, I don't know. And he's like, no. Your
Were you floating above it? Were you next to it? Were you like first person?
He's like, oh, I was the snake. How does he know?
Yeah, he was like, well, that's a very odd question, almost as if he knows.
Right.
Which is just kind of an interesting observation.
Mm-hmm.
And then once Albus gets the full story, then he goes to the portraits. He goes to Everard, and Dillis is all we get here, but it's Dillis Derwent. And Everard's job is to literally raise the alarm and have, quote, the right people find him. And then Dillis's job, we find out a little later, is to go to her other portrait, which is at St. Mungos, and watch Arthur actually arrive at St. Mungos and see what kind of shape he's in. Dillis, we find out later, was a healer at St. Mungos from 1722 to 1741.
Gotcha.
And then was the head mistress at Hogwarts from 1741 to 1768. That is a long, productive career for Miss Derwent.
Yeah.
So, kind of a little background on those two. And then Dumbledore goes into a little further detail, and he goes, they're particularly highly celebrated heads of Hogwarts. We find out a little hint to how he knows so much all the time. It's because
he has a little spy network going on.
Kinda, yeah.
Yeah.
It's a clever way of having a spy network.
Yeah.
But
he moves quickly, though. He gets that going, and then he gets Fawkes to give a warning, which we don't find out immediately what that's for, but it quickly becomes clear, like, if Umbridge is coming.
I think it's for multiple things.
I think it's mostly Umbridge, though.
I'm not sure that it's mostly. I think Umbridge is certainly a part of it, because Albus is very aware of Umbridge's presence.
Mm-hmm.
He tells Minerva, like, hey, go get the rest of the Weasley children out of bed. We need to start getting them here. He gets the kettle from his cabinet or whatever that he's going to use for the portkey.
Yeah.
And he sends Fawkes out. He says they got to use the portkey because they can't do the flu network because it's being watched. Well, that's a direct statement about Umbridge, who's watching it. So he's aware of Umbridge, and Fawkes ends up giving the warning later of, hey, Umbridge is now out and presumably going to the Gryffindor common room.
Yeah, but I think the most dangerous person that Fawkes would need to warn about would be Umbridge. I think it was more for her.
The only thing I'm thinking of is with Fawkes and the ability to be in a lot of different places at once. Mm-hmm. And literally, you're a bird. I mean, you could literally have the advantage of like getting on top of everything and seeing everything. Mm-hmm. And he's just hearing that Arthur was attacked at the Ministry of Magic. I think a part of him is like, make sure we're not being attacked. Like, why couldn't we be attacked here randomly? If Arthur was attacked at the Ministry of Magic, I think Hogwarts is a viable other option.
I don't know if I agree with that.
You don't think at all?
I think that's a bit of a stretch.
That you don't think he can be attacked at Hogwarts?
No, I don't think so. I think he knows Voldemort's at the Ministry right now, so...
You don't think he'd be on high alert? One of his order members just got attacked at the Ministry of Magic.
Which means
and he wouldn't be like...
at the Ministry of Magic. I think it's much more of, okay, like, if Umbridge is awakened and aware of what's going on, she's going to come in and she's going to gather information.
So is Fawkes just flying through the hallways of Hogwarts right now?
I think he's just on lookout for Umbridge. I think he's literally just by Umbridge's office and kind of like keeping an eye to see if she's awake or not.
I think she's a threat. I don't think she's the only threat.
I think she's the threat.
No, I don't think she's the only threat.
We'll have to pull the people.
It's interesting. When I read it, I'm like, okay, he's sending Fawkes out because he's feels a threat to the Order as a whole. And he doesn't know what's going on at this point. This is a rare moment where he's not clued into everything.
That's interesting because I've always taken it as just like, if Umbridge becomes aware, she's going to come in and she's going to make things more complicated. She's going to try to keep the kids from getting home. She's going to ask questions about what's going on. And we can't have her aware of Harry's insight because then Fudge will be aware. And they'll make that very well known because they have zero, like, subtlety to them. So we just got to keep Umbridge at bay. She's the biggest danger at Hogwarts right now.
Yeah, but you can keep her at bay. Like, yes, you get the warning from Fawkes, like, hey, she's figured out that they're out of bed, out of the common room. Mm-hmm. And then he immediately sends McGonagall to be like, just tell her anything. Like,
right.
Give her a story. I don't care what. Like, just
but
say
I think
something.
That's why they needed Fawkes to keep warning us so that McGonagall could go.
Don't get me wrong. I agree that Umbridge is certainly part of it. And a large part of it because she's in the building.
Right.
So there's certainly that threat. I just think that at this particular moment, he's like, wait, could there be a larger thing going on that I'm just not aware of right now?
I think he knows. He has a very good guess of what Voldemort is attempting to do right now. And what Voldemort is attempting to do is nowhere near Hogwarts.
Oh, it's one thing with, like, Sturgis and what happened with Sturgis. Mm-hmm. This is different. Not an Imperious attack. This is an actual physical, like, he's in, like, mortal peril.
Right.
So I don't know. I think Dumbledore might have his like antennas perked up a little bit, like, oh, this might be a problem.
I think we should pull the people.
All right. So Dumbledore, he gets into this action mode essentially, and he's talking to portraits. He's sending Fawkes out. He's sending McGonagall on errands.
Yeah.
And then he pulls out this interesting looking instrument that Harry doesn't exactly know what it is or can't really piece together. Dumbledore talks to it, like poking at it a little bit, and smoke wisps up from it. It eventually comes into a snake.
Which Harry's like, oh, is this confirmation of everything that I just said? In which case, cool, could you look at me and show me that you believe me?
Yeah. And then, he whispers a little bit more to it, and then the snake doubles. It splits and doubles.
Yeah.
And Dumbledore has this, he questions it. He asks it a question, and
he said, like, in essence divided, and that's when it split. And then he was like, okay. And then he doesn't say anything else about the instrument.
Nope, and then just puts it down and
Yep.
continues on about his business.
We'll talk about it more in the spoilers.
Essentially, the bottom line is, Dumbledore at this point is like, okay, this is not great.
Yeah.
Things are not great.
He still talks to one other portrait. Phineas Nigelius, is that how you say it? Who was a Slytherin headmaster, who we learn has a portrait at Grimmauld Place.
Well, it's not only just at Grimmauld Place. It's in what was Harry and Ron's bedroom at Grimmauld Place.
Right.
Which is how he recognizes, the
It was like
the voice
making
and
snarky
laughter.
comments at him all the time.
Yes, but I believe he is Sirius's great-great-grandfather?
Yes.
Great-great-grandfather.
And I love that he pretends to be asleep. And he's like, I'm too tired to go visit my other portrait. It's like, you're painting. How tired can you get?
Yeah, he doesn't exactly seem very, anxious to get on his sworn, honor-bound duty.
Mm-hmm.
And the other portraits in the room are like, are you kidding? No.
Right, they try to, like, threaten him with their wands.
Of all times, now? Really? Like, no. Yeah, the one witch next to him has, like, a particularly, like
thick-looking
thicker wand.
Yeah.
Which, how does that even work? I don't know how that works.
Know. Portrait magic? What's that?
I don't know.
But he goes to visit, and he said that Sirius is okay with the Weasley children and Harry coming to visit.
Stunning.
Yep.
So then we get the warning from Fawkes specifically about Umbridge is on the prowl, and the Flu Network's being watched, so they use the port key.
Mm-hmm.
And right as everyone's grabbing the port key and it's about to go, Harry looks up at Albus, and they lock eyes just briefly.
It says, at once Harry's scar burned hot white, as though the old wound had burst open again, and unbidden, unwanted, but terrifyingly strong, there rose within Harry a hatred so powerful, he felt for that instant that he would like nothing better than to strike, to bite, to sink his fangs into the man before him. Which completely catches him off guard. Like, why am I feeling this hatred towards Dumbledore? That's weird.
Oh, this whole night has been
very weird.
Catching him off guard.
He's like whole 24 hours. Remember, like, he was just kissing Cho in the room of requirement. Now he's in Dumbledore's office with the port key.
Yeah, he's this is, Harry describes it at the beginning of this chapter as well past midnight already.
Mm-hmm.
So it's already a late, weird night, and it's just getting worse.
Uh-huh.
But anyway, so we get to Grimmauld Place. And there's a lot that happens here. We get the kids immediately want to go to the hospital.
Which makes sense.
Which makes sense and is totally understandable. Sirius, on the other hand, is like, you can't do that.
Right.
And they're like, well, why? It's our dad.
Right.
And I feel like this is that moment. We spend so much time with this group of characters, Fred and George and Ron and Harry and all that. We spend so much time with them. But, so we kind of think of them as adults.
Mm-hmm.
They're not.
They're not.
They are children still. It's sunk in later at St. Mungos, but Sirius right now is like, this is why. This is specifically why you can't be in the order.
Mm-hmm.
You don't get it. Like,
well, it explains to them, it's like, okay, literally your father was attacked minutes ago.
He's in a place.
Minutes
He's in a
ago.
place he shouldn't be.
Right.
At a time he shouldn't be there.
Right.
And he was attacked.
Minutes ago.
How?
There's no way you would know.
We have a tough enough time explaining why he was there, let alone how any of you know he's hurt.
Right.
Just literal seconds afterwards.
Right. The only possible way they could would be if they had that Weasley clock on them, just went to, like, mortal peril. Like, if that's the case, then okay.
But that's Molly.
But that's Molly is the one that has the clock, and it's late at night. She's probably asleep, not checking the clock. So there's no way to explain it, and we can't draw attention to the fact that Harry's having these visions. That's very weird.
First of all, I don't believe Molly's asleep. I think she's specifically watching the clock because she knows Arthur's on duty.
Maybe.
I don't think she's sleeping a wink. I think she's very intently watching the clock.
Maybe.
Because she knows how dangerous the job is.
Yeah.
I mean, she's done it.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah.
But yeah, I really... The debate between Fred and George specifically and Sirius, I think, is an interesting one. Because it's that back and forth of... They have every right to be concerned and want to go stand or sit by their father's side. Mm-hmm. Or at least get information on how he's doing. But Sirius is right for a number of reasons. You just can't do it.
Right.
And then they have this back and forth, and it ends with, Fred yelling, like, "Well, this is easy for you to say. You're stuck in this house. You don't do anything."
Right. Which they kind of allude to, too, with the fact that he's unshaven, and it smells a little bit like mundungus, and he's still awake, even though it's super, super late. He's, like, still in his regular day clothes.
It gives you the impression he's drunk.
Yeah, drunk and depressed and all that.
Which, I mean...
It's fair.
It's fair. I mean, literally, he's been relegated to do nothing else, but... Mm-hmm. Fred's off base on a number of levels, and I get he's coming at it from a place of pure emotion, mm-hmm. which I get, but he's off base in that, Dumbledore has dictated this, mm-hmm. and why he can't, mm-hmm. And he's capable of helping if he were allowed to.
Yeah, it's just an
you're just off base.
Low blow.
Very much so. And then, but
from their perspective, of course, like if Arthur were to die, then you kept us at home when we could have been at Dad's deathbed. That would be a grudge we would want to be holding. So you understand why they want to get there, but like you said, the logic says don't. Sirius,
I think, for all the flack that Sirius Black gets mm-hmm. for being a rebel, for being emotionally rash, he could have reacted poorly to this.
Yeah, he could have punched him in the face.
Could have. Instead, he calms himself and responds calmly to Fred. And it was like, you don't get it.
Yeah, no, he's the adult in the room, very much.
He is. And I don't think he ever gets that credit for reacting in that way. I mean, I think he does get it. We'll talk about it a little later, but I think he does get that credit to some extent a little later in this chapter. But that idea of, this is why you're not in the order. You guys aren't emotionally ready for this. Yeah. You guys don't understand.
It's a sacrifice that your father signed up for.
Everyone
knows the risks.
Everybody knows that at any point, this is a war. You can suffer serious injury or death. Mm-hmm. And you guys haven't figured that out yet.
Yeah.
Or come to realize, like,
well, that
can happen.
It has become real. It hasn't been real yet, and now it's real because it's a family threat.
Yeah, it was a really interesting conversation, or not conversation, I guess, but a back and forth between the two characters. Mm-hmm. We do get a note from Molly via Fox, because Fox can do everything, that says Dad is still alive, which is, I love that that's just the first thing right out of the note. Mm-hmm. Calm everybody down, mm-hmm. and then we can get into details later. And then she doesn't give any kind of update until 5:10 in the morning when she walks through the front door and says he'll be okay. Bill is with him. And then here's where I think Sirius does get some credit back. because Molly thanks Harry
Right.
for obviously alerting everybody
saved
to
him.
this.
Yeah.
But of all people, Molly, who had such large issues with Sirius at the beginning of this book over kids and how to manage kids and how to deal with all of it, she gives him a lot of credit for being like, hey, thank you for...
You took care of my children.
Yeah, thank you for watching over them while I had to, be somewhere else.
Which is like, of course I would do that. Obviously, I'm going to do that for you. Molly saying this to Harry, though, does make him feel extra guilt. He took Sirius into the closet and he was like, look, I didn't say this to anyone other than Dumbledore, and obviously Ron heard it too, but like, I was the snake and I attacked, and when we left, he said it was like something rose up inside me, like there's a snake inside me, like I wanted to attack Dumbledore. What's going on? What's wrong with me? And Sirius was very much like, oh, it's probably just like the aftermath of your vision. I wouldn't worry about it. Really, truly, you did a good thing. It's okay. You shouldn't be feeling this guilt. Like, you have saved his life. But that doesn't do much to make Harry feel better. He says he forces himself to stay awake all night because he's too afraid that he's going to attack somebody. And it's just like, it's completely terrifying to him.
I don't blame Sirius for the advice that he gives, because I think that's the, I guess, easy advice to give.
Well, it's also, this is like unprecedented waters. Like, we don't know what's really going on. Like,
he puts a lot of
no one does.
He puts a lot of his faith in Albus, where it's like, well, if Albus thought it was worth noting, he would have noted it. Which, this is an issue of Dumbledore not letting everybody in on the conversation.
It just makes me feel really sad for Harry, because I could totally picture, like, you've had this exhausting long roller coaster of emotion day, and you've been up all night, and now you're terrified that you're going to hurt people that you love, so you spend all night forcing yourself to stay awake. It would just be such an exhausting, like, emotionally, mentally, physically, just exhausting experience.
I understand the advice that Sirius gives, but I don't think it's the best advice he could have given. I think he could have treated it with a little bit more respect, similarly to how McGonagall kind of treated Harry in the dormitory. I think Sirius should have given a little bit more attention to it. That being said, to Harry staying up the rest of the morning because he was afraid to nod off again, I mean, you're really afraid of turning into a snake and attacking Ron. Well, if that's the real fear of you turning into the snake, you went all the way to the Ministry of Magic in London.
I mean, obviously it's an irrational thought, but it was a very, very scary experience to just feel like you were the snake attacking this father figure in your life, and to see the pain that it has caused his children, and to see the looks that they were giving him when he was like, your father was attacked and I was a snake. Like, I think...
Well, you also already are known to have a connection with snakes.
Right. So I think it's, while we obviously see it as an irrational fear, I think for a 15-year-old, it makes sense that that's where his brain goes. And the fact that no adult has really told him, like, otherwise, I think it's noble of him to stay up all night to try to save his friends and, I mean, his essential family, basically. But I think it's just so terrifying for him and exhausting for him to do this.
So now we make our way to St. Mungos. And on the way, Tonks and Moody are escorting them to St. Mungos as a guard. And Tonks keeps pestering Harry about what happened and how it happened. She's more interested in how than what.
Or like, even like, yeah, like this wasn't seeing the future. This was seeing the present, just not your present. Somebody else's present.
She asks Harry if he has any seer blood in his family, which then makes him angry that he's being lumped into the same tree of magic that Trelawney is in, which is just rude. Like, why? Why do you have to be that way?
That's his
Come on now.
only insight into divination. That's the only thing he has to
It's rude.
compare it to.
It's just rude. That's all
He's
it
just
is.
insulted.
It's just rude. Anyway, so they're making it through London, and they come up on this kind of dilapidated warehouse of a shop.
Yeah, that says it's closed for refurbishment. It's a store called Purge and Douse Limited, which, of course, it's named that. And the theory was that sick wizards could come and go and just blend in with the crowd, which really shows what, like, opinion wizards have of muggles, that they think sick wizards, could just come and go and blend in with the muggles.
Well, they had a tough job finding where to even put this hospital, because it needs to be large to accommodate all of the potential issues and the population. It needed to be in a central population, so it had
to be above ground for
health reasons. You needed to be in the major population, so you had to be in London, but you couldn't be in Diagon Alley because there's not enough space.
Right.
Which, how is there not enough space when you can make a tent that looks like it's for two people?
I know.
For like, I don't understand how there's not space.
Magically expand every inch of the place, and you would be fine.
Yeah, I don't understand that exactly,
I
but
don't know.
Whatever.
Maybe when it's a magical building surrounded by other magical buildings, then the limitations are more evident.
Maybe.
But
I mean, with everything, there's got to be limitations, but still. Anyway, so you go up and you have to ask this dummy mannequin for entrance.
Who I love is described as having like eyelashes falling off and like this neon green boa, and just like the fashion is so outdated.
So they finally enter into this chaotic waiting room of people that have like essentially a like bell ringing for a head, or I think a girl has wings coming out of her like back. It is random stuff. And I do love the description of the emblem on the workers there. It's an emblem of a wand and a bone crossed.
I think that's cool.
That is cool. That's cool. A really cool look.
And I also like the fact when Harry asked, are these doctors? Ron's like, no, they're healers. Which I think is an interesting way of looking at a doctor. Like, that is what a doctor should be doing. But calling them healers, I think, makes it seem like the focus of their job is more healing you than it is like paying attention to the negative, I guess. You know what I mean? It just seems like it has a more positive connotation to it. Like, my job is to fix you more so than to diagnose you, I guess.
We do get one of these great Harry Potter Wizarding World phrases. We get, quote, "A clean cauldron keeps potions from becoming poisons, and antidotes are anti-don'ts unless approved by a qualified healer."
Yep.
So there's another Wizarding World ism for you.
I like it.
Before we get to the description of the floors on the floor guide here, this receptionist is the worst person ever.
I don't think she's the worst.
She's rude.
Ever. She's had a
These
long
people have
day.
issues.
She reminds me.
Can you read, sir? Come on.
To be fair, like, I'm sure she's had a long day and she does this. She reminds me of like someone at the DMV. Like,
but you're not at the DMV. You're at
you're at a hospital,
healthcare facility.
But I just
with
feel
people
like,
that need help.
But I feel like some of it's like, okay, you can read, and I feel like their descriptions of the floor are very, very. I mean, they're very, very descriptive, so it should be self-explanatory of where to go.
Well, let's get to the descriptions of the floors.
Yeah.
We get the ground floor, which is artifact accidents, cauldron explosion, wand backfiring, broom crashes, etc. First floor, creature-induced injuries, bites, stings, burns, embedded spines, etc. Second floor, magical bugs, contagious maladies, dragonpox, vanishing sickness, which I don't know what that is, and I'm going to try to pronounce this, scrofungulus?
Do you think vanishing sickness would be like literally parts of you are disappearing away?
I have no idea.
That's scary.
Magical... I don't think I'd want to be on the second floor.
No.
That seems like...
That sounds terrifying.
Yeah, that sounds awful. Third floor, potion and plant poisoning, rashes, regurgitation, uncontrollable giggling, like that, etc. Fourth floor, spell damage. Unliftable jinxes, hexes, and incorrectly applied charms. Fifth floor is just your visitor's tea room and hospital shop.
I like the fact that they have a tea room.
I like the fact that they have a hospital shop. You got to sell that merch. You know?
Well, I mean, most hospitals have those little, like, gift shops. You buy, like, get well cards or flowers or candy or whatever. That seems like fairly normal standards. I mean, we've talked before about all these charms and potions and spells that how they have to be so specific with them or else they become super, super dangerous, and how, like you brew a potion wrong and it goes from being the correct potion to poison and like, all this stuff. It's just, like, the idea that, I mean, it makes sense why these healers have to have so much education in order to work there, because there's so many ways magic can go wrong. Trying to fix it would be so difficult.
We find out that Arthur was actually moved from one floor to the other. Mm-hmm. We find out now he's situated on that first floor, which makes sense given that he was
creature-induced injuries.
Attacked by a massive snake.
Yeah.
The name of the ward is the Diluin ward. Mm-hmm. Lelwellyn. If I'm mispronouncing that, apologies. If you're wondering what that name is, in the wizarding world specifically, it refers to a man who was eaten by a chimera while on holiday.
Sounds horrifying.
It sounds not great. So that's the name of the ward, and again, fits.
Yeah, fits for creature-induced injuries.
Specifically, Arthur is in a section of that ward specifically is for serious bites.
Right.
And the healer in charge is Hippocrates Smethwick, and the trainee healer in training, is Augustus Pye?
Which, again, like, the subtleties that she does with her naming, not very subtle. They're all very medical inclined names, but it's funny, so we'll go with it.
We're going to keep throwing names at you. We got a portrait of Urquhart Rackharrow, who's inventor of Entrail Expelling Curse, which is just super pleasant. Anyway, so we do find out a little bit more about Arthur's injuries specifically. Mm-hmm. We find out that the snake had a weird poison to it that keeps the wounds open. Mm-hmm. So he'd be fine to return home as long as they can take the bandages off. But every time they're trying to take the bandages off,
it just reopens again.
His wounds keep bleeding.
Yeah.
So he has to take a blood replenishing potion. So that's kind of crazy.
He said the other two people in the ward, there's a man who was bit by a werewolf, which he was trying to tell the man, like, oh, I know someone who is a werewolf. He lives a perfectly normal life. And the dude was like, shut up, or I'll bite you. I'll give you a second bite. And then the other woman was someone who wouldn't tell them what bit her, but had a very nasty smell when they took the bandages off. So, which I find that interesting. Like, I mean, I know you and Molly have talked before about when people are injured, but they don't tell you exactly what they did that got them injured. Like, you're at a hospital for a really dangerous bite. Clearly, you should probably tell them what bit you, but they suspect it was an illegal thing, and that's why she's not saying it.
Well, if it's probably an illegal thing, literally just look down the list of illegal things and be like, hey, which one does this fit?
Which one point to it and then plead the fifth.
Arthur is just being so much Arthur. He's like 110% Arthur in this scene, because all he really wants to talk about is how Willie Wittershins was the one that was the one committing all of the exploding toilets for Muggles.
Yeah, and how there's like Muggles in St. Mungos right now because they have to regrow their fingers.
Because he also got caught selling biting doorknobs.
Yeah.
So, but he's saying he got off of the first one. He got off of the exploding toilets easy. Mm-hmm. And he thinks gold was exchanged. Mm-hmm. But we might know why. He really got why. But anyway.
I just love that, like, there's Muggles in St. Mungos. And then he looks around like, oh, maybe they're going to walk in right now.
Yeah. He was just being extra Arthur. Arthur.
The twins, though, were being extra twins.
Yeah.
They kept asking very, very provocative, prodding questions that they know they shouldn't be asking right now, but they're really more asking it to get a reaction and to see some sort of confirmation of their thoughts based on those reactions. So they're like, oh, a giant snake. Harry, didn't you say, like, you know who has a snake? Oh, when you were there working, do you mean you were doing stuff for the order? And Molly keeps trying to shush them like crazy, and Arthur does a very good job of just like completely ignoring them. But clearly they're getting under their skin because they get kicked out of the hospital room.
They get kicked out, and then Moody and Tonks go in,
Mm-hmm.
and then
the expendable years come out.
But here's my thing about this conversation, because obviously when Tonks and Moody go in, they get down to business, and they actually talk business.
Mm-hmm.
Order of the Phoenix business. And I'm like, two things. One of two things has to happen here.
Mm.
Either don't have this conversation in a hospital room where there's other patients in the room,
mm-hmm.
number one. Or number two, cast some spell that gives you like a little bubble of like privacy.
The soundproof spell.
Something.
Yeah.
Where it's just like no one can hear you or they can't hear you, but like
you would think by now they know they're children. Like, of course your kids are going to try to figure out a way to eavesdrop. We know that because their other ministry or order meetings that they've had, they've put spells up for.
And you know Moody is all about constant vigilance.
Right.
Constant
Surely
vigilance.
His eye is watching the kids behind the door, creeping with their ears. Like.
So here's the thing. This is clearly, very obviously, plot convenience.
Mm-hmm.
I think if this was a realistic setting, or in maybe a more adult version of this,
mm-hmm.
yeah, we're not clued in, because Moody would very clearly...
He'd be smart enough to...
Yeah, he would combat this fairly easily.
Yeah.
So this is just purely for our being looped in.
Mm-hmm.
But anyway, the real interesting thing that comes of it is Moody goes, you know, there's something funny about that Potter kid.
Well, he said how obviously he's not aware of what's going on, but if you know who is possessing him, and then Harry immediately pulls it out of his ear, and all the kids look at him with like looks of terror.
And then, chapter ends.
Yep. Of course.
And that's where we will end the non-spoilers. And we'll hear...
When you need mealtime inspiration, it's worth shopping Kroger, where you'll find over 30,000 mouth-watering choices that excite your inner foodie. And no matter what tasty choice you make, you'll enjoy our everyday low prices, plus extra ways to save, like digital coupons worth over $600 each week. You can also save up to $1 off per gallon at the pump with fuel points. More savings and more inspiring flavors make shopping Kroger worth it every time. Kroger, fresh for everyone. Fuel restrictions apply.
All right, so we are back with the spoiler section of chapter 22.
The longest chapter in the world.
Yeah, it's a long chapter title. St. Mungos Hospital for Magical Maladies and Injuries. It's, you know, it takes a lot. I got to write this chapter title in like 5 different places. It just takes a while to type out. Anyway, you had a quick note from the non-spoilers.
But we know Bode from book 4, when they're at the Quidditch World Cup, Bode was an unspeakable, which meant that he works for the Department of Mysteries. And we know that he lost his mind because Lucius put the Imperious Curse on him to try to force him to pick up the prophecy, which obviously you're not allowed to do that. You're only allowed to touch the prophecy if the prophecy is about you. So he's in St. Mungos for that reason. And we know come Christmas time, in a few weeks after this visit, he gets killed by the devil's snare plant that is sent to him, and the poor healer that put it next to his bed, thinking it was a like butterfly plant or something like that, it actually just kills him instead because he was improving with his speech, and the person did not want him to be speaking.
Healers obviously have to be experts
in a lot of things.
But particularly like potion-based things, I would imagine.
Probably.
And, well, depends on, I guess, which floor you're on.
True.
If you're more charms, defense against the dark arts,
well, he would be
herbology.
He would be on the spell damage floor.
So
if it was the third floor with the potion and plant poisoning, maybe they would be more
they would recognize the
plants. Yeah.
That's what I'm saying.
Yeah. No, that makes sense.
Is clearly this particular person did not have a great understanding of herbology.
Right. And to be fair, I think Harry or Ron say it too, of like, who expects to see a double snare in a little potted plant? Like, one little clipping of it, you don't necessarily expect to see that. So, Makes sense, but unfortunately, that does take out Bodrick Bode. Rest in peace.
We did want to double back on another thing from the non-spoiler. We wanted to double back on that mystery instrument that Dumbledore uses briefly.
Yeah, because it's very... Even when you do know what this, like, what the series is and what this is about, it's still kind of like, wait, what's he doing here?
Yeah, it's almost a throwaway paragraph.
Uh-huh.
It's like one very small paragraph. And honestly, I read it the first time and I'm like, okay, whatever. And then I went back and I'm like, wait a minute. That's interesting.
Right. Like, this is important, but what is it actually saying?
Yeah. We both went back and reread it.
Uh-huh.
And the idea that the one snake, the one smoke snake, is coming out of the instrument, and then Dumbledore asks the question.
In essence, divided.
Question mark.
Right.
With a look of grim satisfaction. Which
isn't necessarily happy, but it's not, like, disappointed.
I would interpret the grim satisfaction as a, oh no, I am on the right track.
Maybe.
Kind of feeling of like, I'm right, which, okay, at least I'm on the right path, but oh no. Like, this isn't good.
I can see that.
Like, you know what I mean?
Yeah. Like, when I read it, I see it as Dumbledore's, he just got that Harry was saying, I saw it from the perspective of the snake. And we know that Dumbledore, if he doesn't know, then he's at least very, very well guessing that Voldemort was possessing Nagini, and that's why Harry was able to see it from Nagini's perspective. So I take it as he's asking, is Harry, like, still Harry, or is he also Voldemort? And he's like, no, like, in essence, divided, and since it splits, then it's like, okay, yes, Harry is still Harry, Voldemort is still a separate entity from Harry, even though the snake kind of like connects them together, if that makes sense.
Dumbledore knows there's a connection between Tom Riddle and Harry Potter.
Right.
What he's hoping is that there's still some separation between the two.
Right. It's not like Voldemort has completely taken over Harry.
Correct.
He's not possessing him.
So that would be the satisfaction part of it. But the grim part about it is that they are still connected. Mm-hmm. And this is further proof of that.
Mm-hmm. I went online and a lot of Reddit seemed to think that this was just Dumbledore trying to see if Nagini was a Horcrux or not. And I thought that was a weird interpretation to be like, oh, in essence divided, so Nagini is both a snake and a Horcrux. I don't think Dumbledore really is checking to see if Nagini's a Horcrux right now. I mean, later on, he does mention when he's listing out all the Horcruxes, he's like, you know, I've been concerned about Voldemort's snake for a while now, but I don't think this is him checking to see if she's a Horcrux. I really think it's more him worrying about Harry and his soul.
On first read, I also interpreted it as Dumbledore checking in on Harry more. Mm-hmm. That being said, where I think that theory can come from is because we only see in the smoke two snakes.
Right.
So
I think people see it literally as like
just
Nagini.
A
snake. Yeah.
So I understand that. It comes off as a throwaway paragraph, but if it's so throwaway, why does she devote a section to him stopping the events,
right,
going to pick up this random instrument,
right,
bring it in front of Harry,
and check it,
yeah, and then have a moment with Dumbledore and this instrument, and then just go away from it?
Right.
There's more to it.
Like, if it wasn't important, she'd just cut it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like, it means something.
Yeah.
And I don't think I've ever thought twice about this section.
I think about it every single time I read, because I'm like, what is this really supposed to be implying here? And even knowing this whole series, I'm like, I don't fully know.
First read, you'd never get it.
No, you would just be like, what is Dumbledore doing? Dumbledore just, like, talking to himself here.
I mean, it could be the mystique of Albus Dumbledore, but...
Yeah.
And then the other thing we wanted to talk about...
It's a big, big one. But it's a tiny one. It's one of those things where she makes it so small and subtle that you don't give it a second thought, but then later, like, the implications is massive. When the Weasley children and Harry arrived at Grimmauld Place, Creature says, "Back again, the blood traitor brats. Is it true their father's dying?" And then Sirius yells, "Out!" And that is a big mistake. Because we know Creature interprets that out as permission to leave, and he goes to the Malfoys, and he feeds them a lot of information that helps form the plan of luring Harry to the Ministry of Magic, because who does he care enough to rescue? Sirius Black.
Yeah, this is a very, very small detail that can go very much overlooked.
I remember the first time I read it, and like later on when it was, Creature's been like serving more than one master for a long time. I was like, well, wait a second, when did this happen? And I went back through the chapters to try to figure out when this was. And when I finally found it, I was like, oh my gosh, this is so small. It's so subtle. It's as subtle as like when they find the locket when they're cleaning the house, and it's like just this throwaway line. It's like, but that's so huge. That's so massive. It has really important repercussions later on. It's tiny. It's tiny,
and there's some shenanigans involved in it because, later he does call for Creature. Granted, he doesn't give him a specific order, but he still calls for him.
Mm-hmm.
And I think most house elves, when called for,
show up,
would appear.
Yeah.
Creature is taking this very literally, of like, well, he didn't technically order me to the house, so I don't have to go to the house.
I mean, Sirius says later, like, oh, house elves aren't allowed to leave without permission, and Harry's like, no, they can. Dobby did it many times. He had to punish himself later, but he managed it fairly well. So if you gave him a specific order of out, he interpreted it as get out.
Well, that's kind of interesting with house elf magic, because
it's open to interpretation?
Kinda, and they're like bound to follow their master's orders, but clearly not, because they can't ignore them. They just feel really bad about doing it.
Yeah, that, and they can like kind of take some liberties with how they interpret it.
Creature seems particularly willing to take those liberties.
Which is why when Harry like gets Creature in his possession and he gives like an order, he's like very specific of like, okay, like when he wants him to follow Malfoy, he's like, okay, you can follow him, but don't let him see you. Don't give him any kind of written or verbal or any indication that this is what you're doing. And are there any loopholes? And he like watches Creature try to think through it. He's like,
Creature does try to figure out if there's a loophole.
Darn it, you mastered your order for me.
But
darn.
This kind of, as much praise as I gave Sirius in the non-spoiler, which he deserves again, and I don't think enough people give him credit for that. This is a knock on him.
To be fair, he's saying the blood traitor brats, their father's dying. Like, now is not the time, Creature. Get out of here.
Yeah, but you can't be lazy. You have to treat it, with its due attention and due respect.
Yeah, but remember, he's been drinking, and now this is an emergency situation. It makes sense that Sirius didn't be like, get out of this room, but specifically go to your bedroom.
But if this was a Death Eater we're talking about, I think Sirius treats this with a certain level of attention, even in his more shabby state, because he doesn't think much of Creature. He doesn't think twice about it. He just fires it off, and oh well. You know what I mean?
Well, it's because what Creature represents for him.
Yeah, I'm not saying that Sirius doesn't have some issues he's got to work through, but he's proven very capable of making smart, educated decisions. Clearly, when it comes to Creature, for whatever bias, he can't make a correct decision there.
One way or the other, though, it
causes a bunch of problems.
It causes his death later on, and It just shows that, like, butterfly effect of if he hadn't said this, then would Harry have ever been lured to the ministry? Would he ever have picked up the prophecy? Would any of this have happened just by ordering Creature to get out?
Of all the characters that you think may or may not have character arcs, Creature's probably
a big one.
Creature's not probably on your list of the top 10, 15, 20, but he does have one.
Yeah. I mean, Harry says that, or Ron, one of the two, say later on, like, oh, I think I once used to fantasize about putting his head up on a wall.
That's because Creature was making him phenomenal breakfast.
Right. He's like, well, he's so nice, and he's happy, and he's keeping the house clean, and he feeds me, and to think I once wanted him dead because he was so irritating and insulting and all that fun stuff. But, like, they prove, like, if you treat someone nice, they'll treat you nice.
Yeah, it's always a two-way street. So, some interesting spoilers. Do you have anything else?
No.
Well, we're going to wrap it up here. Hopefully you enjoyed our conversations on Dumbledore's Office and Grimmauld Place and St. Mungos. So if you liked the episode, please repost it, share it so we can keep on growing. Comment, participate in the polls on Spotify. We really appreciate all that feedback. Also, there's 2 links wherever you find this podcast. One is support the podcast, where you can leave a financial donation, which really helps us out because there's a lot of time and energy. And the second one is leave a voice message. I haven't plugged that in a minute.
Yeah.
Leave us a voice message.
We'd love to hear from you guys.
We'd love to hear your actual voices. And, you know, if you leave a particularly interesting comment, you might end up in a podcast episode. So let us know what you guys are thinking, and we will see you back here next Saturday for Chapter 23.
Thank you for listening to Hogwarts, a podcast. If you like what you've heard, please click the subscribe button on your preferred podcasting app and follow us on Twitter and Instagram at HogwartsAPod.